Miss Marple's bent quill. The writer penned their own. Doom Chapter 1. The Ink of Fate. The autumn wind howled across the moors, rattling the windows of Harcourt Manor as Miss Jane Marple stepped from the village taxi. Her knitting bag swung lightly at her side, a deceptive emblem of her unassuming nature. The manor, a grey stone relic of Victorian ambition, loomed against the twilight sky, its ivy-clad walls whispering secrets. Miss Marple had been invited to St. Mary Mead's book club, an unexpected summons from her old friend Mrs. Bantry, who promised a literary evening with a twist. Little did Miss Marple know, the twist would be murder. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old books and wax polish. The book club gathered in the drawing-room. Mrs. Bantry, bustling with nervous energy. Dr. Haydock, the village physician, peering over his spectacles. Clara Vane, a sharp-eyed editor from London. Lionel Gray, a rival novelist with a perpetually sour expression. And young Sophie Trent, Evelyn Harcourt's protégée, clutching a notebook as if it were a lifeline. Evelyn herself, the evening star, had yet to appear. Her absence hung over the room like a storm cloud. "She's always late," Lionel muttered, swirling his brandy. "Thinks it makes her mysterious." Clara Vane arched an eyebrow. "Or she's polishing that manuscript. The one everyone's whispering about." Miss Marple, seated by the fire, noted the tension. The manuscript, rumoured to be Evelyn's magnum opus, had stirred gossip for months. Some said it exposed the literary world's darkest secrets. Others claimed it was a thinly veiled attack on her rivals. Either way, it had made Evelyn enemies. Mrs. Bantry clapped her hands. "Let's fetch her. She's probably lost in her study again." The group ascended the creaking staircase, Miss Marple trailing behind, her keen eyes scanning the manor's faded grandeur. At the study door, Sophie knocked timidly. No answer. Dr. Haydock pushed the door open, and a collective gasp filled the air. Evelyn Harcourt lay slumped over her desk, her silver hair spilling across a scatter of papers. Her right hand clutched a bent quill, its nib twisted as if wrenched in fury. Ink stained her fingers, pooling blackly on the desk. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, stared at a half-written page. The room was cold, the window ajar, letting in the moan of the wind. Dr. Haydock knelt beside her. "She's gone. Poison, I'd wager, but we'll need a proper examination." Miss Marple stepped forward, her gaze sweeping the scene. The bent quill intrigued her. Such an odd detail, deliberate, perhaps symbolic. The desk held a typewriter, a stack of books and a single candle, its wax dripped onto a letter. The manuscript, if it had been there, was gone. "Who saw her last?" Miss Marple asked, her voice gentle but firm. Sophie stammered, I brought her tea at 4. She was writing, muttering about truth in ink." Lionel snorted, always so dramatic. Clara's face was pale. "That manuscript, if it's missing, someone here knows why." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. She had seen such gatherings before. Friends turned foes, secrets spilling like ink. As the group retreated to summon the police, she lingered, noting the ink's peculiar sheen and the quill's broken feather. Evelyn Harcourt had penned her own doom, but whose hand had guided the fatal stroke? Chapter 2. A quill's last scratch. The study of Harcourt Manor was a tomb of silence, broken only by the distant wail of the wind and the faint scratch of Miss Marple's knitting needles as she sat in a corner, observing. The police had yet to arrive, delayed by the muddy roads of St. Mary Mead, and Dr. Haydock had forbidden anyone to touch Evelyn Harcourt's body until the coroner could examine it. The book club members, shaken and restless, had retreated to the drawing-room, leaving Miss Marple alone with the scene of death. She preferred it this way. Solitude sharpened her senses, and the study had much to tell. Evelyn Harcourt remained slumped over her desk, her lifeless hand still gripping the bent quill. The quill was no ordinary tool. Its ebony shaft was inlaid with silver, its nib now cruelly twisted, as if it had been forced against the paper with unnatural strength. Miss Marple leaned closer, her spectacles glinting in the candlelight. The ink on Evelyn's fingers was not the usual blue-black of a fountain pen, but a deep, almost violet hue, shimmering faintly under scrutiny. A half-written page lay beneath her, its words jagged and uneven, as if written in haste or distress. The text stopped mid-sentence. "The truth will out, though the pen trembles." Miss Marple's lips pursed. The quill's damage suggested more than a mere accident. Had Evelyn struggled with an attacker? Or had the quill been deliberately ruined? A message to the writer who wielded it? She recalled Evelyn's reputation. Brilliant but paranoid, convinced her rivals were stealing her ideas. At a literary luncheon months ago, Mrs. Bantry had whispered that Evelyn kept her manuscripts under lock and key, fearing plagiarism. Such fears, Miss Marple knew, could breed enemies. She examined the desk with care. The typewriter, an old Underwood, sat untouched, its ribbon dry. A stack of books, Dickens, Bronte, and a worn copy of The Elements of Style, teetered beside a candle, its wax pooled around a sealed letter. The letter was addressed to C.V. Clara Vane, the editor perhaps. Miss Marple made a mental note to inquire. The window, still ajar, let in a chill that stirred the curtains. No footprints marred the polished floor, but a faint scuff-mark near the desk caught her eye, as if something heavy had been dragged. The half-written page intrigued her most. The paper was thick, watermarked with Evelyn's initials, a luxury for a writer of her means. The ink matched the stains on her fingers, but its violet sheen was unusual, almost bespoke. Miss Marple recalled a chemist in St. Mary Mead who mixed custom inks for the gentry. Perhaps he could identify its source. The words themselves were cryptic, hinting at a revelation Evelyn had not lived to complete. The truth will out. But what truth, and at whose expense? She turned her attention to the quill's origins. Its craftsmanship suggested it was a gift, or a prized possession, not a tool one would casually destroy. Miss Marple's mind drifted to a memory of her nephew Raymond, a writer himself, who once spoke of quills as symbols of a writer's soul. To bend one was to break more than wood and feather. It was to shatter a legacy. Had Evelyn's killer known this, choosing the quill as a cruel emblem of their crime? A creak at the door startled her. Sophie Trent, Evelyn's protégée, stood there, her eyes red from crying. I couldn't stay downstairs," she stammered. "They're all whispering, accusing each other." "Is it true the manuscript's gone?" Miss Marple's gaze softened, but her mind remained sharp. "Gone or hidden, my dear? Tell me, did Evelyn ever speak of her quill? It seems special." Sophie hesitated, clutching her notebook. She loved it, said it was a gift from someone she trusted years ago. She'd never write without it, even when her hands shook. She was so afraid someone would steal her words. Afraid enough to make enemies? Miss Marple asked gently. Sophie's lips trembled. She thought Lionel Gray copied her ideas, and Clara. Evelyn said she'd sell her soul for a bestseller. But she never told me who she feared most, say me. Marple nodded, filing away Sophie's words. Fear, she knew, was a powerful motive, and Evelyn's paranoia had cast a wide net. As Sophie retreated, Miss Marple returned to the quill, her fingers brushing its twisted nib. The study held more secrets. She was sure of it. The ink, the quill, the scuff mark, all were threads in a tapestry of deceit, and somewhere, perhaps, in the manor's shadowed corners, the missing manuscript waited, its pages heavy with the truth Evelyn had died to tell. Chapter 3. The manuscript vanishes. The Harcourt Manor drawing-room buzzed with unease as the book club members awaited the police, their faces lit by the flickering fire. Miss Jane Marple sat quietly, her knitting needles clicking in a steady rhythm that belied the sharpness of her gaze. Evelyn Harcourt's death had cast a pall over the group, but it was the absence of her unpublished manuscript, rumoured to be a scandalous exposé, that stirred the most whispers. Its disappearance was no accident, Miss Marple was certain, and the truth lay hidden among the suspects now fidgeting before her. Mrs. Bantry, ever the anxious hostess, wrung her hands. We must search the study again. That manuscript was Evelyn's. Life's work. If it's gone, it's a crime atop a crime. Dr. Haydock, polishing his spectacles, nodded. Agreed, but we must be methodical. The police will want everything undisturbed. Clara Vane, the editor, tapped her foot impatiently. Methodical or not, someone's taken it. Evelyn wouldn't misplace a single page. She was obsessive. Chanteuse. Gray, the rival novelist, sneered from his armchair. Obsessive? Paranoid, you mean? She thought I'd steal her precious words. As if I'd touch her drivel. Sophie Trent, Evelyn's protégée, clutched her notebook, her voice barely a whisper. She kept it locked away. Always. She said it was too dangerous to leave out. So Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. Dangerous, indeed. A manuscript that could ruin reputations or expose secrets was motive enough for murder. Then let us search, she said mildly, but with care. We wouldn't want to overlook a hiding place. The group returned to the study, where Evelyn's body had been covered with a sheet, awaiting the coroner. The room felt colder now, the air heavy with the scent of ink and dust. Miss Marple directed the search, her gentle suggestions steering, the others like a shepherd with a flock. Dr. Haydock examined the desk drawers, finding only pens and stationery. Clara rifled through a bookshelf, her movements sharp and purposeful, while Lionel lingered near the window, his scowl deepening. Sophie, hesitant, checked under the rug, her hands trembling. Miss Marple's attention settled on a portrait of Evelyn above the fireplace. A stern likeness, her eyes seeming to follow the room. The frame was slightly askew, a detail that might have gone unnoticed by a less observant eye. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the gilt edge. A faint click sounded, and a panel in the wall slid open, revealing a small safe. Mrs. Bantry gasped. A hidden safe? Evelyn was full of surprises. Clara's eyes narrowed. If the manuscript's anywhere, it's in there. But we'll need the combination. Miss Marple noted the safe's modern design, its dial gleaming in the dim light. Did Evelyn ever mention a code? A date, perhaps, or a phrase? Sophie shook her head. She was secretive, but she loved wordplay. She'd hide meanings in her dedications, her titles. Maybe it's something literary. Lionel snorted. Or it's just lost, and we're chasing ghosts. This is a waste of time." Miss Marple ignored him, her mind turning over Sophie's words. A literary code. Evelyn's style, no doubt. She made a mental note to examine Evelyn's books for clues. For now, the safe remained locked, its contents a tantalizing mystery. As the search continued, Miss Marple drew each suspect aside, her questions deceptively casual. To Clara, she remarked, "You must have known Evelyn's work intimately. Did she ever share the manuscript's theme?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening around a cigarette case. "Only hints. She said it would rewrite the literary world." I thought she was exaggerating, but now I'm not so sure. To Lionel, Miss Marple mused, Evelyn's accusations of plagiarism must have stung. Were they baseless? Lionel's face reddened. She was delusional. I've no need to steal from a has-been. But she made enemies, waving that manuscript like a weapon. Sophie, when questioned, revealed more than she intended. "Evelyn trusted me," she whispered. "She read me snippets, veiled stories about betrayal, ambition. I think she was writing about someone here." Miss Marple's knitting paused. "Someone here." The manuscript's absence was no theft for profit. It was a desperate act to bury the truth. As the group reconvened empty-handed, she noticed Clara glance at Lionel, a fleeting look of suspicion. Dr. Haydock, meanwhile, seemed preoccupied, his fingers tracing the scuff mark Miss Marple had noted earlier. The police arrived at last, their boots echoing in the hall. As they took charge, Miss Marple retreated to her chair, her mind weaving the threads of the evening. The hidden safe, the literary code, the suspect's guarded words. The manuscript was the key, and someone in Harcourt Manor knew where it was, or had ensured it would never be found. She smiled faintly, her needles resuming their rhythm. The truth, like a well-crafted sentence, would reveal itself in time. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Study. The clock in Harcourt Manor's hall struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the silent corridors. The police had departed hours ago, taking Evelyn Harcourt's body to the coroner and sealing the study with a perfunctory lock. The book club members, exhausted and uneasy, had retired to their guest rooms, but sleep eluded Miss Jane Marple. Her mind buzzed with the day's discoveries: the bent quill, the missing manuscript, the locked safe. Something about the study nagged at her, a detail out of place, and she resolved to investigate under the cover of night. Slipping on her shawl and clutching a small torch, Miss Marple moved soundlessly down the staircase, her knitting bag tucked under her arm. The manor was a labyrinth of shadows, the moonlight casting eerie patterns on the walls. As she approached the study, a faint creak made her pause, but it was only the settling of old timbers. She eased the door open, the police lock proving no match for a hairpin and her nimble fingers, a trick learned from a mischievous nephew years ago. Inside, the study was a tableau of stillness, the air thick with the scent of ink and wax. Evelyn's desk loomed in the centre, its surface cluttered with papers and the typewriter, now silent. Miss Marple's torch beam swept the room, lingering on the scuff mark she had noticed earlier, near the desk's leg. It was deeper than she'd realized, a gouge in the polished wood, as if the desk had been shoved aside with force. She tested the desk, pushing gently. It moved with surprising ease, revealing a misalignment with the rug's pattern, a sign it had been repositioned recently. Her gaze darted to the walls, searching for anomalies. The bookshelf, heavy with leather-bound tomes, seemed untouched, but a faint draught stirred the curtains by the window, which was now closed. She inspected the window frame, finding no signs of forced entry, yet the draught persisted. Kneeling, she traced the baseboard and discovered a hairline crack, barely visible, suggesting a concealed panel. Her fingers probed but found no latch. A secret passage, perhaps, or a hidden compartment? She made a mental note to explore further when daylight returned. As she stood, a low moan carried through the room, faint and mournful. Miss Marple's pulse quickened, but her lips curved in a wry smile. The Manor's ghostly rumours, whispered by Mrs. Bantry over tea, spoke of a spectral figure, a wronged ancestor haunting the halls. Village gossip, no doubt, amplified by the night's tension. She recalled a similar tale in St. Mary Mead, where a ghost proved to be a loose shutter and an overactive imagination. Still, she checked the corners of the room, her torch revealing only dust motes and cobwebs. The moan, she deduced, was the wind funneling through the chimney, distorted by the Manor's acoustics. Returning to the desk, Miss Marple examined the candle. Its wax pooled around the letter addressed to C.V. The wax had dripped unevenly, suggesting the candle had been tilted, perhaps during a struggle. She slipped the letter into her bag for later scrutiny. Mindful of the police's return, her eyes fell on the portrait of Evelyn above the fireplace, its frame still askew from the safe's discovery. The hidden safe remained locked, its combination a puzzle tied to Evelyn's love of wordplay. Miss Marple studied the portrait's stern gaze, wondering if Evelyn herself had left a clue to the safe's secret. A sudden flicker of movement caught her eye, a shadow shifting near the bookshelf. She froze, her torch steady. "Who's there?" she called softly, her voice calm but firm. Silence answered, but the draught grew stronger, tugging at her shawl. Stepping closer, she noticed a book slightly askew, its spine protruding. She pulled it, a copy of Jane Eyre, and felt a click. The bookshelf trembled, then swung inward, revealing a narrow passage, its walls damp and mossy. Miss Marple's heart raced, but caution prevailed. The passage could wait until morning. A fall in the dark would help no one. She closed the bookshelf, memorizing the book's position, and retreated to the door, her mind alight with possibilities. The moved desk, the scuff mark, the secret passage, all pointed to a deliberate act, not a ghostly whim. Someone had been in the study, perhaps to steal the manuscript or to cover their tracks. As she locked the door and ascended the stairs, Miss Marple's thoughts turned to the suspects. Clara Vane, with her sharp ambition, might know the Manor's secrets from her visits. Lionel Grey, bitter and defensive, had lingered near the window earlier. Sophie Trent, so devoted to Evelyn, could hide a darker loyalty. Even Dr. Haydock, with his quiet observance, seemed preoccupied by the scuff mark. The shadows in the study were not supernatural, Miss Marple concluded, but human, born of greed, envy, or fear. And somewhere, in the Manor's hidden corners, the manuscript waited, its pages a silent witness to Evelyn's doom. Chapter 5. The Cryptic Dedication. The morning sun filtered weakly through Harcourt Manor's heavy drapes, casting a pale glow over the drawing-room where Miss Jane Marple sat, a cup of tea cooling beside her. The events of the previous night, the secret passage, the scuff mark, the ghostly moan, lingered in her mind. But a new clue demanded her attention. The letter addressed to C.V. she had found in Evelyn Harcourt's study, its wax seal, unbroken. Before opening it, however, Miss Marple's thoughts turned to a discovery made at breakfast, when Mrs. Bantry, in a flurry of tidying, had unearthed a signed copy of Evelyn's final published novel, The Veil of Words, tucked behind a cushion. Its dedication, penned in Evelyn's elegant hand, had caught Miss Marple's eye, and she now held the book, her fingers tracing the inscription. The dedication read, "To L.G., whose shadow dims the page, may truth outshine your envy." The initials L.G. pointed unmistakably to Lionel Gray, the rival novelist whose bitterness toward Evelyn was no secret. The words were sharp, a veiled barb dressed in literary flourish, and Miss Marple sensed they held a key to the feud that might have led to Evelyn's death. She recalled Lionel's sneer at the book club, his dismissal of Evelyn's work as drivel. Envy, she knew, could fester into something far darker. Setting the book aside, Miss Marple joined the others in the library, where the book club had gathered to await the police inspector's return. The room, lined with oak shelves and smelling of leather and dust, was a fitting stage for unravelling Evelyn's past. Clara Vane paced near a window, her cigarette smoke curling upward. Lionel Gray slouched in an armchair, a newspaper unopened in his lap. Sophie Trent sat cross-legged on the floor, her notebook filled with scribbled notes, while Dr. Haydock leafed through a medical journal, his brow furrowed. Mrs. Bantry bustled about, offering tea no one wanted. Miss Marple, settling into a high-backed chair, opened the Veil of Words and read the dedication aloud, her voice soft but clear. "This inscription is most curious, don't you think? It seems Evelyn had strong feelings about someone." Lionel's head snapped up, his face reddening. "What's that supposed to mean? She was always throwing accusations, that one. Jealous of my success, no doubt." Clara arched an eyebrow. "Success? Your last book barely sold, Lionel. Evelyn's were bestsellers. If anyone was jealous—" "Enough!" Lionel snapped. But his eyes darted to the book in Miss Marple's hands, betraying unease. Miss Marple's gaze remained mild. "I wonder, Mr. Gray, if you and Evelyn had a falling out, perhaps over a shared project or a perceived slight." Lionel's jaw tightened. "We were colleagues, nothing more. She fancied herself a genius, but her ideas weren't original. She borrowed from everyone, me included." Sophie looked up, her voice trembling. "That's not true. Evelyn was meticulous. She'd never steal. She said someone betrayed her trust long ago." Miss Marple noted Sophie's fervour, filing it away. Turning to Clara, she asked, "As her editor, Miss Vane, did Evelyn ever mention this betrayal, or the dedication's meaning?" Clara exhaled a plume of smoke, her expression guarded. Evelyn was cryptic. She'd drop hints about old grudges, but never names. That dedication, though, it's personal. She didn't write like that for just anyone. Dr. Haydock cleared his throat. "If I may, Miss Marple, grudges can poison the mind. I saw Evelyn last month. She was agitated, spoke of settling scores with her new book. Perhaps this dedication was a prelude." Miss Marple nodded, her mind weaving the threads. The dedication's tone suggested a deep wound, one tied to Evelyn's past. She recalled a snippet from Mrs. Bantry about Evelyn's early career. A literary partnership with a young writer abruptly ended amid rumours of plagiarism. Could Lionel have been that writer? Or was the dedication a misdirection, masking another target? Excusing herself, Miss Marple slipped back to the study, now unsealed by the police. She retrieved the letter to CV from her bag and broke the seal, revealing a single sheet in Evelyn's hand. It read, "Clara, beware the shadow who claims the light. The manuscript will reveal all." The words echoed the dedication's imagery, suggesting a connection. Was Lionel the shadow in both? Or had Evelyn suspected Clara herself, warning her of another? Returning to the library, Miss Marple approached Sophie privately, sensing the girl's loyalty to Evelyn might yield more. "My dear, did Evelyn ever speak of her early days? Perhaps a collaboration gone wrong?" Sophie hesitated, glancing at Lionel across the room. When she'd had too much wine, she mentioned a friend who stole her first novel's idea. She never said who, but she kept a photo of them in her study. I saw it once, tucked in a drawer. Miss Marple's eyes brightened. A photo could confirm the suspect's identity. She resolved to search the study again, but for now she watched Lionel, whose fidgeting had intensified. The dedication, the letter, Sophie's revelation, all pointed to a grudge rooted in Evelyn's past, one that had festered until it spilled into murder. As the inspector's car rumbled up the drive, Miss Marple tucked the book under her arm, her knitting resuming its steady rhythm. The cryptic dedication was a thread in the tapestry of Evelyn's doom, and she was determined to follow it to its source. Chapter 6. Whispers of a Rival's Pen. The afternoon light cast long shadows across the village hall of St. Mary Mead, where the local writers' group had gathered for their weekly meeting. Miss Jane Marple sat near the back, her knitting needles clicking softly, her presence unremarkable to the casual observer. She had slipped away from Harcourt Manor under the pretence of needing fresh air, but her true purpose was to observe. Lionel Grey, whose name had surfaced repeatedly in the mystery of Evelyn Harcourt's death, the dedication in Evelyn's book, with its pointed jab at LG, and Sophie's hint about a past betrayal, had sharpened Miss Marple's focus on the rival novelist. Today, she hoped to uncover more about his feud with Evelyn, and his possible role in her murder. The hall buzzed with literary chatter, the air thick with the scent of tea and damp wool. Writers of varying talent, poets, novelists, and memoirists clustered around trestle tables, sharing manuscripts and critiques. Lionel stood at the centre, his voice loud and self-assured as he read from his latest work, A Grim Tale of Betrayal. His audience nodded politely, but Miss Marple noted a few exchanged glances, as if his bravado masked desperation. She recalled Mrs. Bantry's gossip. Lionel's recent novels had flopped, his publisher threatening to drop him. Envy of Evelyn's success, it seemed, was not his only burden. As the meeting broke for tea, Miss Marple approached the refreshment table, where Lionel was pouring himself a cup with unsteady hands. "A fine reading, Mr. Grey," she said, her tone gentle. "Your work has such intensity. Did you and Evelyn Harcourt ever collaborate? Your styles seem complementary." Lionel's cup rattled against its saucer. Collaborate? With her? Never. She was a thief, always sniffing around my ideas. Accused me of copying her, if you can believe it. Me! His laugh was bitter, drawing curious looks from nearby writers. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Accusations can sting, especially among peers. I heard she was quite protective of her new manuscript. Lionel's jaw tightened. That blasted manuscript! She waved it about like a trophy, claiming it'd ruin us all. If you ask me, someone did the world a favour by making it vanish. His words hung in the air, too bold for innocence. Miss Marple sipped her tea, noting the sweat beading on his brow. A dangerous thing, a manuscript like that, she mused. I suppose you never saw it. Never, he snapped. But his eyes flicked away, betraying a lie. Before she could press further, the meeting resumed, and Lionel retreated to his seat. Miss Marple lingered, chatting with the group's organizer, a chatty widow named Mrs. Phipps. "Poor Lionel," Mrs. Phipps confided, lowering her voice. "He's in debt, you know. His publisher's advances dried up, and he's been borrowing from half the village. Evelyn's success drove him mad. She'd taunt him at readings, saying he'd never match her. Did he ever visit her at the manor?" Miss Marple asked, her tone casual. "Oh, yes, last month. Said he was settling a score. Came back in a foul mood, muttering about her manuscript. I shouldn't say, but I saw him with a letter once, in her handwriting. He burned it in the pub's hearth." Miss Marple's knitting paused. A letter from Evelyn, destroyed. It suggested intimacy, or guilt. She thanked Mrs. Phipps and returned to Harcourt Manor, her mind turning over this new thread. Back in the manor's library, she sought out Sophie Trent, who was curled up with her notebook, her face pale. "My dear," Miss Marple began, settling beside her, "you mentioned a photo in Evelyn's study of a friend from her early days. Could it have been Lionel Grey?" Sophie hesitated, glancing at the door. "I think so. The photo was old, from a literary festival. They were laughing together, but Evelyn wrote something on it. Trust broken. She kept it hidden, like a reminder." Miss Marple nodded, her suspicions growing. She slipped into the study, now familiar terrain, and opened the desk drawer Sophie had described. Tucked beneath a stack of receipts was the photo. A younger Evelyn and Lionel, arms linked, smiling, at a book fair. On the back, in Evelyn's hand, was scrawled, "Trust broken, 1900. The year matched Lionel's first novel, which some had whispered echoed Evelyn's unpublished work. As she pocketed the photo, Miss Marple noticed a crumpled paper in the drawer's corner, a fragment of a letter, half burned in Evelyn's violet ink. It read, "Access to my draft, Lionel, but betray me again, and the world will know." The rest was ash, but the implication was clear. Lionel had seen the manuscript, perhaps even stolen it. Had he killed to keep its secrets buried? Returning to the drawing room, Miss Marple watched Lionel, who was arguing with Clara Vane over a publishing contract. His voice was sharp, defensive, and his hands shook as he lit a cigarette. Financial ruin, a past betrayal, access to the manuscript, Lionel's. Motives were stacking like books on a shelf. Yet Miss Marple sensed others in the manor hid their own truths. Clara's ambition, Sophie's devotion, Dr. Haydock's quiet scrutiny. All were pieces of a puzzle Evelyn had died to complete. As dusk settled over the manor, Miss Marple resumed her knitting, her needles a metronome to her thoughts. The whispers of a rival's pen had grown louder, but the full story of Evelyn's doom remained unwritten. She would need to tread carefully, for the killer was close, and the manuscript's secrets were still out of reach. Chapter 7. The Locked Drawer's Secret. The late morning light seeped through the mullioned windows of Harcourt Manor, casting a soft glow on the study's cluttered desk. Miss Jane Marple stood alone in the room, her knitting bag resting on a chair, her attention fixed on a small drawer in Evelyn Harcourt's desk. The police had searched the study cursorily, but Miss Marple's sharp eyes had noted the drawer's lock, a sturdy brass affair, untouched by the officer's haste. The photo of Evelyn and Lionel Grey, the burned letter fragment, and the cryptic dedication had painted a picture of betrayal. But Miss Marple sensed deeper secrets lay hidden, waiting to be unlocked. She knelt, her fingers tracing the lock's contours. It was no simple mechanism. Evelyn had chosen it for security, not decoration. Recalling a trick from her village days, when a locked church arms box had baffled the vicar, Miss Marple retrieved a hairpin from her bag and set to work. The lock yielded with a satisfying click, revealing a shallow compartment stuffed with papers. A bundle of letters tied with twine, and a single folded note, written in Evelyn's violet ink. Miss Marple settled into the desk chair, her spectacles perched on her nose, and examined the note first. It was a cipher, a series of numbers and letters arranged in a grid. 3, 12, 19, 8, 1 to 4, 22 to 5. Below it, in Evelyn's hand, was a single line. "The debt must be paid, or the world will know." The words chilled her. Blackmail, she realized, was a dangerous game, and Evelyn had played it boldly. The cipher likely pointed to a name or a secret, but decoding it would require time, and perhaps a literary key, given Evelyn's penchant for wordplay. Turning to the letters, Miss Marple untied the twine and scanned the first. It was from Clara Vane, dated 2 years prior, pleading for Evelyn to reconsider a contract. "Your refusal threatens my firm's survival. Name your price." The tone was desperate, hinting at financial strain. Another letter, from Dr. Haydock, was more personal, thanking Evelyn for her discretion about a private matter during a house call. A third, unsigned but in a looping script, begged Evelyn to bury the past and not publish that wretched book. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but its urgency suggested a deep fear of exposure. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Evelyn had been no saint. These letters painted her as a manipulator, collecting secrets like a magpie with shiny trinkets. Had she used the manuscript to threaten someone? Clara, Dr. Haydock, or another? The coded note's mention of a debt suggested a specific target, but the cipher's meaning eluded her. She recalled Evelyn's love of puzzles, mentioned by Sophie. Perhaps the cipher referenced a book or a manuscript page. A creak at the door startled her. Dr. Haydock stood there, his medical bag in hand, his expression wary. "Miss Marple, the inspector's due soon. You shouldn't be here." She smiled, tucking the note into her sleeve, but leaving the letters visible. "Just tidying, Doctor. I found these most revealing. Evelyn seems to have had many correspondents." Dr. Haydock's eyes flicked to the letters, his face paling. "She was a private woman. Those are personal." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, her tone mild. "Yet privacy can breed secrets. Did Evelyn ever confide in you about a debt, perhaps one owed to her?" He hesitated, adjusting his spectacles. "She mentioned debts, yes, but vaguely. Said some owed her more than money. I thought it was her way of venting." Miss Marple nodded, noting his unease. As he left, she slipped the letters back into the drawer, but kept the coded note, determined to crack its secret. Later, in the drawing room, she observed the suspects over luncheon. Clara Vane picked at her food, her cigarette case never far from hand. Lionel Grey, sullen, avoided her gaze, his fingers drumming nervously. Sophie Trent, red-eyed, whispered to Mrs. Bantry about Evelyn's kindness. Each, Miss Marple sensed, hid something. Clara's desperation, Lionel's envy, Sophie's blind devotion, even Dr. Haydock's guarded calm. Her thoughts turned to Evelyn's character. In St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple had known women like her, clever, ambitious, but ruthless when crossed. Evelyn's blackmail, if true, had invited danger, Yet Miss Marple felt a pang of pity. To live in fear of betrayal, to wield secrets as weapons, was a lonely path. Had Evelyn's killer acted out of desperation or cold calculation? The cipher held the answer, she was sure. As the inspector arrived, Miss Marple retreated to the library, spreading the coded note on a table. She tested simple ciphers, substitution book codes, but the numbers resisted her efforts. A memory surfaced, Evelyn's dedication in the veil of words, with its literary flourish. Perhaps the cipher referenced a specific text, a page or line from her own work. She resolved to examine Evelyn's books, particularly her last novel, for clues. The locked drawer's secret had revealed Evelyn's darker side, but it also pointed to her killer. Miss Marple's knitting resumed, its rhythm a counterpoint to her racing thoughts. The cipher, the letters, the manuscript, all were threads in a web of deceit, and she was determined to untangle them before another page turned in this deadly tale. Chapter 8. A page torn from truth, the rain pattered against. Harcourt Manor's windows, cloaking the late afternoon in a grey shroud. Miss Jane Marple sat in the library. Her knitting needles paused as she pondered the coded note from Evelyn Harcourt's locked drawer. The cipher, 312-19-8, 1-4, 22-5, remained unsolved. But her morning's work had yielded a theory. It might reference a specific book, perhaps The Veil of Words, given Evelyn's cryptic dedication. Her musings were interrupted by a commotion in the hall, where Mrs. Bantry's voice rose in alarm. "Miss Marple, come quickly! Sophie's found something in her room." Miss Marple tucked the note into her sleeve and hurried to the guest wing, where Sophie Trent stood trembling, clutching a crumpled sheet of paper. The book club members, Clara Vane, Lionel Gray, Dr. Haydock, and Mrs. Bantry, crowded around, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. Sophie's room, a modest space with a narrow bed and a writing desk, was in disarray, as if she'd been searching frantically. "It was under the mattress," Sophie stammered, holding out the paper. "I was looking for my pen, and there it was. It's from Evelyn's manuscript, I'm sure." Miss Marple took the page, her spectacles glinting as she examined it. The paper matched the watermarked sheets from Evelyn's study, its edges torn, as if ripped from a larger document. The text, typed but annotated in Evelyn's violet ink, was a single paragraph. "The Society of the Quill, so noble in name, hides a rot at its core. One among them, cloaked in prestige, betrayed their oath for gold, selling secrets to the highest bidder. The truth, once penned, will shatter their facade." The words trailed off, the page ending abruptly. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. The Society of the Quill was a prestigious literary circle, known for its exclusivity and influence. Evelyn had been a member, as had Lionel and Clara, she recalled from village gossip. The passage hinted at a scandal, perhaps the motive for Evelyn's murder. "Where exactly did you find it, my dear?" Miss Marple asked, her voice gentle but probing. Sophie's eyes darted to the floor. "Under the mattress near the headboard. I swear I didn't put it there. Someone must have hidden it." Clara Vane's lips thinned. "Hidden it? Or planted it to make you look guilty? That's Evelyn's style, sowing suspicion." Lionel snorted, his arms crossed. "Or Sophie took it herself, playing the innocent. She was always sniffing around." Evelyn's desk. Sophie's face flushed. "I'd never. I loved her. She trusted me." Dr. Haydock intervened, his tone calm. "Let's not jump to conclusions. The page could have been misplaced during the search yesterday. Miss Marple noted their reactions. Sophie's panic, Clara's cynicism, Lionel's aggression, Dr. Haydock's measured calm. The page's discovery in Sophie's room was no accident, she was certain. Someone had placed it there, either to incriminate Sophie or to divert attention from themselves. She folded the page carefully, intending to compare it with Evelyn's other writings. "May I keep this for now?" she asked Sophie, who nodded reluctantly. "And perhaps, Miss Trent, you could tell me more about the Society of the Quill. Evelyn mentioned it often, I presume." Sophie hesitated, glancing at Clara and Lionel. She was proud to be a member, but lately she said they'd changed. She called them hypocrites, said someone had betrayed her trust. I thought she meant Mr. Grey, but she never named names. Lionel's scowl deepened. More of her paranoia. The Society's a club, not a conspiracy. She just wanted attention. Clara exhaled sharply. "Don't play innocent, Lionel. The Society's not all awards and sherry. Evelyn was digging into something big." Miss Marple's mind raced. The manuscript page confirmed the rumours. Evelyn's work was an exposé, targeting a traitor within the Society. Had that traitor killed to silence her? She recalled the letters from the locked drawer, particularly Clara's desperate plea and the unsigned one begging Evelyn to bury the past. The Society might connect them all. Later, in the study, Miss Marple compared the torn page to the half-written sheet from Evelyn's desk. The type was identical, the violet ink consistent. A marginal note on the torn page caught her eye. C.V. knows more than she admits. Clara Vane, again. The letter to C.V. from Chapter 5, warning of a shadow, now took on new weight. Was Clara a target of Evelyn's blackmail, or complicit in the scandal? As evening fell, Miss Marple joined the others for dinner, her eyes scanning their faces. Sophie avoided her gaze, guilt or fear in her posture. Clara's fingers twitched, as if itching for a cigarette. Lionel drank heavily, his bravado crumbling. Dr. Haydock, ever observant, watched them all, his silence as telling as words. The torn page had shifted the mystery, pointing to a literary scandal that threatened more than reputations. Miss Marple resumed her knitting, the needles a steady, rhythm against the rain's patter. The page torn from truth was a clue, but also a challenge. Someone in the manor had hidden it, hoping to bury Evelyn's secrets. But secrets, like ink, had a way of bleeding through. She would find the truth, she resolved, before the manuscript's next page surfaced, or another life was lost. Chapter 9. The Editor's Hidden Motive. The fire in Harcourt Manor's drawing-room crackled, casting flickering shadows on the faces of the book club members as they sat in uneasy silence. The rain had ceased, leaving a damp chill that seeped into the bones. But Miss Jane Marple felt a different kind of chill, one born of suspicion. The torn manuscript page, found in Sophie Trent's room, had pointed to a scandal within the Society of the Quill, but a marginal note, C.V. knows more than she admits, had turned her attention to Clara Vane. The editor's sharp demeanour and guarded responses suggested a deeper involvement in Evelyn Harcourt's death, and Miss Marple resolved to uncover her motive. Clara sat by the window, her cigarette case open, a thin trail of smoke curling upward. Her eyes, usually so calculating, betrayed a flicker of unease as Miss Marple approached, her knitting bag in hand. "Miss Vane," Miss Marple began, her voice as gentle as a village gossip's, "you must have worked closely with Evelyn. Her manuscript was to be your publishing house's triumph, I presume?" Clara's fingers paused on her cigarette. Triumph? Hardly. Evelyn was difficult, demanding rewrites, delaying deadlines. Her book was a gamble, not a guarantee. Miss Marple's spectacles glinted. A gamble worth taking, surely, for a firm in delicate straits. I've heard whispers in the village about Vane and Son's troubles. Clara's lips tightened, but she forced a laugh. Village gossip. Every publisher has lean years. Evelyn's book was promising, yes, but not worth killing for, if that's what you're implying. Miss Marple smiled undeterred. "Oh, I imply nothing, my dear. But Evelyn's letter to you, warning of a shadow, suggests she trusted you with something, perhaps a secret about her manuscript." Clara's hand trembled, the cigarette ash falling to the rug. She wrote cryptic nonsense. I humoured her. That's all. Miss Marple nodded, filing away Clara's defensiveness. She recalled the letter from the locked drawer, Clara's desperate plea for Evelyn to sign a contract. Financial ruin was a powerful motive, and Clara's publishing house, Vane and Sons, was rumoured to be on the brink of collapse. Had Evelyn's manuscript been Clara's last hope, or a threat she couldn't afford to let surface? Her opportunity to dig deeper came later, when Mrs. Bantry, ever eager to help, invited Miss Marple to sort through Evelyn's business papers in the study. "The police missed these," Mrs. Bantry said, pointing to a filing cabinet. "Perhaps there's something about the manuscript." Miss Marple sifted through invoices and contracts, her fingers pausing on a ledger labelled Vane and Sons, 1924-1925. The numbers told a grim story: declining sales, unpaid debts, and a loan from a private lender due imminently. Tucked inside was a note in Clara's handwriting. "Met E.H. at the Rose and Crown, 3rd May. She refuses to commit unless I suppress the truth. Unacceptable." The date was 2 weeks before Evelyn's death, and the mention of suppressing the truth echoed the manuscript's exposé. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. Secret meetings at a pub suggested Clara and Evelyn had more than a professional relationship. Had Evelyn demanded Clara bury the manuscript's scandalous content, threatening Vane and Sons' survival? Or had Clara, desperate to save her firm, ensured the manuscript and its author never saw print? She sought out Dr. Haydock in the library, where he was reading by lamplight. "Doctor," she said, settling beside him, "you move in literary circles. Did you ever hear of Clara Vane meeting Evelyn privately, perhaps at the Rose and Crown?" Dr. Haydock adjusted his spectacles, his expression guarded. "I may have seen them there once. Clara seemed agitated, Evelyn smug. I thought it was a contract dispute. Publishing's a cutthroat business, Miss Marple." "Indeed," she replied, her mind turning over the ledger's evidence, "and cutthroat businesses breed desperate measures." At dinner, Miss Marple observed Clara closely. The editor's usual poise was fraying. She snapped at Lionel Gray when he mocked her firm's shoddy books, and avoided Sophie's tearful questions about Evelyn's legacy. Lionel, still sullen, drank heavily, while Sophie's nervous glances suggested guilt or fear. Dr. Haydock, as ever, watched silently, his calm a contrast to the room's tension. Miss Marple's thoughts returned to the manuscript. The torn page's reference to the Society of the Quill implicated Clara, a member, but the ledger and note suggested a personal stake. Had Clara killed to save her firm, or to silence a scandal that threatened her own reputation? The coded note from the locked drawer, still unsolved, might hold the key, but Miss Marple needed more, perhaps a confrontation to shake loose the truth. As the evening drew to a close, Miss Marple resumed her knitting, the needles a steady rhythm, against the Manor's oppressive silence. Clara Vane's hidden motive was clearer now, but the puzzle was far from complete. The manuscript's secrets, like the shadows in the Manor, grew darker with each clue, and Miss Marple knew the killer was watching, waiting for her next move. Chapter 10. The Typewriter's Final Clack. The morning mist clung to Harcourt Manor's windows, muffling the world outside as Miss Jane Marple sat in Evelyn Harcourt's study, her knitting bag at her side. The room, though familiar, felt heavier now, its secrets pressing against the walls. The torn manuscript page, Clara Vane's financial, desperation, and the coded note had tightened the web of suspicion, but a new clue beckoned. The old Underwood typewriter on Evelyn's desk, its keys, silent since her death, had caught Miss Marple's eye during her nighttime investigation, and she suspected it held a mechanical secret, a final clack that might unravel the night of the murder. The typewriter was a relic, its black, enamel-chipped, its keys worn from years of Evelyn's prose. Miss Marple leaned closer, her spectacles reflecting the dim light. The ribbon, a faded red and black strip, was misaligned, caught on a gear, as if jammed mid-stroke. She pressed the Q key gently. It stuck, leaving a faint, uneven mark on the paper still threaded in the carriage. The paper itself was blank, but its edges bore tiny ink smudges, matching the violet hue on Evelyn's fingers. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Had Evelyn been typing when interrupted, or had the killer tampered with the machine? She removed the ribbon carefully, noting its uneven wear. The red ink was barely used, but the black was nearly spent, suggesting Evelyn favoured it for drafts. A closer inspection revealed a faint impression on the ribbon's surface. Letters pressed so hard they'd torn the fabric. Shadow. The word echoed the cryptic letter to Clara and the dedication in the veil of words. Was it a message Evelyn had typed in her final moments, or a deliberate clue left by her killer? Miss Marple's mind turned to the timeline of Evelyn's death. Dr. Haydock had estimated the time of death between 4:16 and 6:00 p.m., based on the poison's effects. Sophie had brought Evelyn tea at 4:00, finding her alive and writing. The book club had discovered the body at 6:30. The typewriter's jammed key and torn ribbon suggested activity closer to the murder. Perhaps a struggle or a frantic attempt to leave a clue. But whose hand had struck the keys? She sought out the police inspector, who was re-interviewing the suspects in the drawing room. Handing him the ribbon, she said, "Inspector, this may be of interest. The typewriter in the study was used shortly before Miss Harcourt's death. The word shadow was typed with force. Could your men test the ribbon for fingerprints?" The inspector, a gruff man named Craddock, nodded. "Good catch, Miss Marple. We'll send it to the lab. Anything else?" "Only a thought," she replied, her tone mild. "The alibis for Whodunit, have you verified them? A typewriter doesn't jam itself." Craddock flipped through his notebook. Miss Trent was in the kitchen after delivering tea. Mrs. Bantry was in the drawing-room, chatting with Dr. Haydock. Mr. Gray claims he was in the garden smoking. Miss Vane says she was in her room, writing letters. We're checking their stories. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Mr. Gray's garden stroll interests me. The ground was damp that evening. Mud would cling to shoes. Did you notice his boots? Craddock frowned, then dispatched an officer to check Lionel's shoes. Miss Marple returned to the drawing-room, where the suspects sat in tense silence. Lionel Gray, his face pale, was polishing his cigarette case, his fingers unsteady. Clara Vane smoked furiously, her gaze darting to the door. Sophie Trent clutched her notebook, her eyes red, while Dr. Haydock read a medical journal, his calm almost too perfect. Miss Marple approached Lionel, her voice soft. "Mr. Gray, you enjoy the Manners Gardens, I hear. Were you out long on the evening Evelyn died?" Lionel's hand froze. "Not long. Needed air. It was stuffy in here." "Curious," she mused. "The paths were muddy, yet your shoes were spotless when we found Evelyn. Perhaps you stayed indoors?" His eyes widened, then narrowed. "I cleaned them. Habit. What's it to you?" Before she could reply, the officer returned, whispering to Craddock. The inspector cleared his throat. "Mr. Gray, your boots are clean. Too clean. No mud, no grass, despite your claim of a garden walk. Care to explain?" Lionel's face reddened. I misspoke. I was in the library reading, got confused." Miss Marple's knitting resumed, its rhythm steady. Lionel's cracked alibi placed him inside the manor, near the study, during the murder window. The typewriter's clue, with its torn ribbon, and the word shadow, suggested he might have been there, perhaps confronting Evelyn. Had he jammed the key in a struggle, or typed the word to misdirect? Later, in the study, Miss Marple reenacted the scene. She sat at the desk, mimicking Evelyn's posture, and pressed the typewriter keys. The cue jammed again, requiring force to free it. A struggle then. Evelyn typing, an intruder interrupting, the ribbon tearing under pressure. The violet, ink smudges on the paper, hinted Evelyn had handled it post-tea, narrowing the timeline to 4:30 or later. As she left the study, Miss Marple overheard Clara whispering to Dr. Haydock, "Lionel's lying. I saw him near the study at 5. Dr. Haydock's reply was inaudible, but his frown deepened. Miss Marple filed this away, her suspicions spreading. Lionel's alibi was broken, but Clara's eagerness to implicate him raised questions. Was it she deflecting, protecting her own secrets? The typewriter's final clack had spoken, revealing a lie and a struggle. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her mind weaving the clues. The ribbon, the jammed key, Lionel's deception. The killer was close, their shadow lengthening over the manor. She would need to tread carefully, for the next clue might be the last. Chapter 11. Betrayal in the Margins. The twilight sky pressed against Harcourt Manor's windows, casting a sombre hue over the library where Miss Jane Marple sat, a stack of Evelyn Harcourt's old manuscripts before her. The typewriter's jammed key and Lionel Gray's broken alibi had tightened the noose of suspicion. But Miss Marple's thoughts now turned to Sophie Trent, Evelyn's protégée, whose nervous demeanour and fierce loyalty hinted at a deeper story. The torn manuscript page found in Sophie's room, coupled with her vague answers about Evelyn's trust, suggested a betrayal closer than Miss Marple had first imagined. To uncover it, she turned to Evelyn's earlier works, where the truth often hid in the margins. The manuscripts, retrieved from a trunk in the study, were drafts of Evelyn's first novel, Whispers of the Muse, published 20 years prior. The pages were yellowed, marked with Evelyn's violet ink in a meticulous hand. Miss Marple's spectacles glinted as she scanned the margins, where Evelyn had scribbled notes, edits, musings, and occasionally something more personal. One note on page 47 caught her eye. S promised fidelity, but ambition blinds. Beware the pupil who seeks the master's crown. The initial S pointed to Sophie, who had been Evelyn's assistant for 3 years, a role that granted her access to Evelyn's secrets and her manuscript. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Mentorship, she knew, was a delicate dance, easily soured by envy. St. Mary Mead, she had seen young apprentices turn on their mentors, their gratitude curdling into resentment. Sophie's devotion to Evelyn had seemed genuine. But the torn pages discovery in her room and her evasive answers suggested a hidden ambition. Had Sophie coveted Evelyn's success, perhaps even her unpublished manuscript? She sought Sophie in the drawing room, where the book club members lingered, their faces drawn with fatigue. Clara Vane smoked by the fireplace, her eyes sharp. Lionel Grey nursed a brandy, his bravado diminished since his alibi's collapse. Dr. Haydock read quietly, his calm a stark contrast to the room's tension. Sophie sat alone, her notebook open, her pen scratching furiously. Miss Marple approached, her knitting bag in hand, her voice soft as a grandmother's. "My dear," she began, settling beside Sophie, "you were so close to Evelyn. She must have shared her early drafts with you, perhaps even her notes." Sophie's pen froze, her eyes darting to Miss Marple. "Sometimes she'd ask me to proofread, but she was private about her old work. Said it was raw, not ready for eyes." Miss Marple nodded, producing the manuscript page with the marginal note. This note mentions a pupil and ambition. Evelyn wrote it years ago, but it feels timely. Did she ever fear you might outshine her? Sophie's face paled, her hands trembling. Outshine her? I worshipped her. She taught me everything, how to craft a sentence, how to find my voice. I'd never betray her. Her voice cracked, drawing glances from the others. Miss Marple's gaze remained gentle but unyielding. Betrayal takes many forms, my dear. Perhaps you read her new manuscript, saw its brilliance, and wanted it for yourself. The page in your room suggests you had access. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I didn't take it. Someone planted it, I swear. Yes, I read parts of the manuscript. She let me to help with edits. But I'd never steal it. I wanted to be like her, not replace her. Miss Marple's knitting needles clicked a hey, steady counterpoint to Sophie's distress. And yet, ambition can blind us. Evelyn wrote of a pupil seeking her crown. Did you ever submit your own work, perhaps under her name? The question struck like a dart. Sophie's breath hitched, and she clutched her notebook, its pages filled with her own stories. Once, I sent a story to a magazine using her initials. I thought it'd get noticed. She found out and she was furious, said I'd abused her trust. But we made up. She forgave me. Miss Marple's eyes softened, But her mind raced. Sophie's admission confirmed the marginal note's warning. A pupil's ambition had strained Evelyn's trust. Had that strain festered, leading Sophie to poison her mentor to claim the manuscript's glory? Or was Sophie a pawn, the page planted to frame her? She pressed further, her tone gentle. The manuscript's exposé, did it mention you, perhaps? Something you feared revealed? Sophie shook her head, tears spilling. No, it was about the society of the Quill, about betrayal and greed. I begged her not to publish it. She'd make enemies. But she laughed, said the truth was worth it. The confrontation drew Clara's attention. Her cigarette paused mid-air. "Sophie, you little fool!" she snapped. "Evelyn used you, dangling her success to keep you loyal. You're no killer, but you're not innocent." Lionel snorted. "None of us are. Evelyn made sure of that." Miss Marple noted Clara's quick deflection, Lionel's cynicism. Sophie's confession had cracked open a wound, but the killer's identity remained elusive. Later, in the study, Miss Marple re-examined the manuscript page from Sophie's room. Its marginal note about Clara. "CV knows more." Sophie's access to the manuscript made her a plausible thief, but Clara's financial motive and Lionel's lies kept them in play. The coded note's cipher, still unsolved, might name the true culprit. As night fell, Miss Marple resumed her knitting, the manner's silence heavy with unspoken truths. Sophie's betrayal in the margins was a piece of the puzzle, but the full picture of envy, ambition, and murder was yet to emerge. The killer, she sensed, was growing restless, and the next clue would test her resolve. Chapter 12. The Unfinished Epilogue. The air in Harcourt Manor was thick with anticipation, the kind that precedes a storm. Miss Jane Marple stood in the study, her knitting bag resting on Evelyn Harcourt's desk, her eyes fixed on a newly discovered treasure. The final chapter of Evelyn's missing manuscript, found that morning in the secret passage behind the bookshelf. The police, alerted by Miss Marple's earlier discovery of the passage, had searched it thoroughly, uncovering a single typewritten page tucked inside a hollowed-out book, the complete works of Shakespeare. The page, incomplete and chilling, seemed to foretell Evelyn's death, and Miss Marple suspected it was no coincidence. The killer, she believed, had read it and turned fiction into reality. The page, watermarked with Evelyn's initials, was titled Epilogue, The Final Quill. Its text was haunting. She sat at her desk, the quill trembling in her hand, its ink the colour of twilight. The shadow loomed behind her, unseen, its breath a whisper of betrayal. The poison, swift and silent, stole her words, her truth, her life. The manuscript, her legacy, vanished into the night, but the truth would not be silenced. The words stopped mid-sentence. The typewriter's ribbon jammed on the Q key, as Miss Marple had noted, leaving a faint smudge. A marginal note in Evelyn's violet ink read, "For CV, a warning or a trap." The passage's details, the quill, the poison, the vanishing manuscript, mirrored Evelyn's murder with uncanny precision. Had Evelyn written her own death as a literary flourish? Or had she sensed her doom and embedded a clue? Miss Marple's pulse quickened. The killer had access to this page, using it as a blueprint to stage the crime. She gathered the book club, members in the drawing room, the manuscript page in hand, her plan forming. Clara Vane, Lionel Gray, Sophie Trent, Dr. Haydock and Mrs. Bantry sat in a tense semicircle, their faces lit by the fire's glow. Inspector Craddock stood by the door, at Miss Marple's request, his notebook ready. The manor's silence was oppressive, broken only by the crackle of logs and the faint tick of a clock. "Friends," Miss Marple began, her voice steady, "this page, found today, is Evelyn's unfinished epilogue. It describes her death. Poison, a bent quill, a stolen manuscript, with chilling accuracy. One of you read this and made it real. I propose we discuss it openly, to see what light we can shed." Clara's cigarette trembled. "That's absurd. Evelyn was always dramatic. She wrote fiction, not prophecy." Lionel's laugh was harsh. "Or she was taunting us, writing nonsense to stir trouble. Sounds like her." Sophie's eyes welled, with tears. She showed me early drafts. She said the epilogue would shock the world. I didn't know it was this." Dr. Haydock's brow furrowed. "A dangerous game, writing one's own death. If the killer used it, they had access to her study and her trust." Miss Marple nodded, her gaze sweeping the room. "Indeed, Doctor. The page was hidden in the passage, accessible only through the bookshelf. Who among you knew of it?" Silence fell, heavy and accusing. Miss Marple set her trap, producing the coded note from the locked drawer. 312-19-8, 1-4-22-5. "This cipher found earlier may name the killer. I've deciphered it using the veil of words as a key. The numbers correspond to page and line, revealing a name." She paused, watching their faces. Clara's jaw tightened, Lionel's hands clenched. Sophie gasped, and Dr. Haydock leaned forward, his calm cracking. The lie was deliberate. Miss Marple hadn't cracked the cipher. But fear could loosen tongues. Clara spoke first, her voice sharp. "You're bluffing. If you know the name, say it." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Patience, Miss Vane. Let's test alibis again. Miss Trent, you were in the kitchen after 4 hours, but the cook mentioned you left briefly. Where did you go?" Sophie's face crumpled. I went to the study to check on Evelyn. She was alive, typing. I left her alone." Lionel snorted. "Convenient. And I suppose you didn't nick that page?" Miss Marple turned to Clara. "Miss Vane, your letters to Evelyn suggest desperation. Did you visit her study that evening? Perhaps to plead for the manuscript?" Clara's eyes flashed. "I was in my room, as I said. You've no proof otherwise." Dr. Haydock cleared his throat. "Miss Marple, this is speculation. The epilogue could be coincidence. Poison's common enough." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said. "But the typewriter's ribbon, torn on shadow, and this page's hiding place suggest intent. Inspector, have your men found fingerprints on the book?" Craddock, briefed earlier, played along. "We're testing it now, ma'am. Results soon." The room tensed, eyes darting. Miss Marple's trap was simple. The threat of evidence would push the killer to act. She announced, "Tonight, I'll lock this page in the study's safe with the cipher. Tomorrow, we'll open it with the police." As the group dispersed, Miss Marple lingered. Her knitting resumed. She'd planted a seed, knowing the killer would try to retrieve the page before dawn. With Craddock's men hidden in the passage, she waited, her needles clicking like a metronome. The unfinished epilogue had named no one, but its truth had set a trap. The killer, cornered by their own shadow, would soon step into the light. Chapter 13. The Quill's True Master. The dawn light crept through Harcourt Manor's windows, painting the drawing-room in hues of gold and shadow. Miss Jane Marple stood before the assembled book club members: Clara Vane, Lionel Gray, Sophie Trent, Dr. Haydock, and Mrs. Bantry, their faces taut with anticipation. Inspector Craddock flanked her, his officers stationed discreetly by the doors. The trap set the previous night, with the manuscript's final chapter locked in the study's safe, had borne fruit. The killer, driven by fear, had attempted to retrieve it, only to be caught in the secret passage. Now, Miss Marple prepared to unveil the truth, her knitting bag at her side, her voice calm but unyielding. "Friends," she began, "Evelyn Harcourt's death was no accident, but a carefully orchestrated act, its blueprint drawn from her own pen. The bent quill, the missing manuscript, the cryptic clues, all point to one among you. Let me explain how they interlock." She held up the bent quill, its ebony shaft glinting. This was Evelyn's prized tool, a symbol of her craft. Its deliberate damage suggested a personal vendetta, not a random act. The violet ink on her fingers, custom-made, tied her to the half-written page. The truth will out. She died to protect that truth. Clara shifted uneasily, her cigarette unlit. Lionel's scowl deepened, while Sophie clutched her notebook, tears brimming. Dr. Haydock's calm faltered, his spectacles catching the light. Miss Marple continued, producing the torn manuscript page from Sophie's room. This page, exposing a scandal in the Society of the Quill, was planted to implicate Miss Trent. But its marginal note, "CV knows more," pointed elsewhere. The final chapter, hidden in the passage, described Evelyn's death with eerie precision. Poison, a quill, a stolen manuscript. The killer used it as a guide. She paused, her gaze settling on Clara Vane. "Miss Vane, your publishing house, Vane & Sons, was failing. Evelyn's manuscript, an exposé of literary betrayal, was your lifeline or your ruin. The environmentalism, you profited from her success, while she suffered in obscurity. The ledger revealed secret meetings at the Rose and Crown, where Evelyn refused to suppress the manuscript's truth. You knew its contents, didn't you?" Clara's face paled. I needed her book. It was my only chance to save the firm." Miss Marple nodded. "But Evelyn's manuscript named you as the Society's traitor, selling secrets for profit. You couldn't let it surface. The letter to CV warned of a shadow. You, cloaked in ambition. You had access to her study, knew the passage, and read the epilogue. On May 3rd, you poisoned her tea with cyanide, procured from a Edeu photographer's supply, and staged the scene. The bent quill, the jammed typewriter spelling shadow to misdirect." Clara's voice trembled. "She was going to destroy me! My family's legacy, everything I worked for." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her tone remained firm. "You destroyed her instead. The coded note, 3-12-19-8, 1-4, 22, was a red herring meant to confuse. But the photo of you and Evelyn, marked trust broken, confirmed your past betrayal. Last night you entered the passage to steal the epilogue, but the police were waiting." Clara's shoulders slumped, tears falling. "I didn't mean... I just wanted to save my firm." Inspector Craddock stepped forward, cuffs in hand. "Clara Vane, you're under arrest for the murder of Evelyn Harcourt." As Clara was led away, the room fell silent. Sophie sobbed. Lionel stared at the floor, and Dr. Haydock shook his head. Mrs. Bantry whispered, "How dreadful!" Miss Marple resumed her knitting, her needles clicking softly. The Quill's true master was Evelyn, but her truth outlived her. Words like secrets have power, and hers revealed the killer. Later, in the quiet of the manor's garden, Miss Marple reflected on the case. Evelyn's ambition had bred enemies, but her legacy, her words, endured. The bent quill, a symbol of a stolen legacy, had guided Miss Marple to justice. She smiled faintly, her thoughts drifting to St. Mary, Mead. The world was full of shadows, but truth, like a well-crafted sentence, always found its way.